And turning now to campaign 2020, President Trump accepted his party's nomination last night on the final night of the Republican National Convention.
Your vote will decide whether we protect law-abiding Americans or whether we give free rein to violent anarchists and agitators and criminals who threaten our citizens.
The president addressed the nation and a crowd of supporters from the White House's South Lawn, where he defended his record and laid out his plans for what he intends to accomplish over the next 4 years. Margaret Brennan, moderator of Face the Nation, joins us now from Washington, D.C. Margaret, yesterday, of course, the final night of the RNC. So what message were the Republicans and the president trying to get across to voters?
Well, the attempt here is to try to solidify the base. It doesn't look likely that the president will bring in new voters, just given how partisan this country is. We saw with the DNC and polling afterwards that really just increased enthusiasm among some Democrats, but it didn't necessarily really change the polling data when it comes to that head-to-head race. With the Republicans and President Trump, the message is that the crisis is over and that the alternative to President Trump would, Joe Biden, would hurt the economy and lead to lawlessness. That was the message President Trump drove home. That was his way of addressing racial strife and the protests that are happening right now. There was no call to unity around that. It was instead framed as President Trump being able to protect the country from violence. So he didn't explain why that's not happening now under his watch, but when he mentioned Joe Biden 41 times in his speech, it was often in this very dark alternative to his presidency and argued for his own reelection.
And Margaret, today thousands gathered on the National Mall for a march calling for racial justice and police reform. So how are lawmakers actually responding to these calls for change?
Well, you know, these protests have been planned for a while. They're smaller than initially expected because of the virus and restrictions, but they are supposed to be about gaining attention from lawmakers who basically have gone home without making any of those promised changes to police reform. It was back in the spring, in the wake of the killing of George Floyd, that you saw real momentum come out of these protests. And in June, those proposals that had Democratic and Republican support, they went nowhere because they couldn't agree on a bill and the details of it. So right now we are just pretty much at a stalemate.
All right, Margaret Brennan, thank you so much for joining us.
And of course, you can join Margaret for Face the Nation. That's on Sunday morning at 10:30.